Bismillah bil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, Sirata al-lazina an'amta alayhim, غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. Uh, this month we have the three Sundays. Next week, Dr. Marcia Rashid, many of you know her. She came from Bosnia during the Bosnian conflict in the 90s and became members of the Islamic Center. They were refugees from Bosnia. And Marcia had gone on to become a physician and an oncologist. She's married to Hamad Rashid, who is also an oncologist. So she will talk to us about Bosnia next week. The following week, I'm going to talk about the spectrum of beliefs around the world, Islamic beliefs around the world. So everybody thinks that Islam is nothing but a big monolith, but idea is that what we do here in the Islamic Center is that what represents the world, or what they do we reflect that? So, I mean, these are subjects which have been talked about. And so, the last Sunday will be Dr. Ormi Anjum on the history of Islam. That will be the 28th of May. We are going to have a program in the June, and then a decision we have made, and that is that we will skip Sunday lectures during the summer. However, what I suggest is that instead of having a formal lecture like we have an informal conversation. So anybody who wants to come and join, there will not be a formal lecture. We can pick a topic and we can talk among ourselves. So this is the self education and self realization effort. And there are a lot of topics that we can bring and discuss. So that is in a nutshell. Now, our speaker for this morning, Salim um, Al Alwazani. Yeah. Last night I went over that 100 times on that name, so I won't stumble. Why can't you have a name like simple 100%? Dr. Alwazani, I'm grateful to Salah Jabrin that he drew my attention and introduced me to him in absentia, and then we did. He has been coming here, but he's such an unassuming person that he has never let us know that how great he is, and he is great in so many ways. He's from Nablus, Palestine. He got his PhD in architecture from the Catholic University in Washington D.C. And he is currently a professor of architecture and environmental design at Bowling Green State University. He's also the past chair of that department. So he's going to talk to us about the history of Islamic architecture and architectural features. No, he's going to talk about the elements of sacred architecture in mosque architecture. Yes. So please welcome Dr. Salim Elwazani.
Thank you, Amjad. Appreciate very much the opportunity for me to talk here. Thank you for giving the light. That's great. Actually, this is Amjad to help you. This is the title of the presentation. It is.
I also memorized that last night. But my age is showing up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the idea here is very simple. I think we all relate to it. Most of us here, most of maybe all of us, uh, and we relate to the idea of mosque. And we've seen calligraphy, we've seen colors, we've seen a lot of things around us. The idea is extremely simple, but the depth of it is the distinctive feature of it. Basically, we see nice things in the mosque. We see the calligraphy. Look even at this piece of wood here. This sort of the window. This would be a window here. Actually, if you look around us, we have those pieces there. If you look at them, that's calligraphy. This is part of us. We know about it. But it's really always we take things for granted. We don't know in depth where that's coming from and why this came about. So the idea is extremely simple, is that when we look into the mosque in particular, obviously you have an image about this mosque. When you go home, you know that there's a corridor, there's this room, there's that room, and. But also there is image about other things like the surfaces. I'm talking about surfaces in particular. I always think of these three, four windows. I see them up there all the time. So same thing. We all read things. We don't consciously know what we're doing, but we read it. We know it. We want to remember it. We can remember it. So the idea is the following: where this beautiful calligraphy, which we know about Islamic architecture, particularly the mosque, coming from. The idea is that one, we start with the idea of sacredness of the Quran. We all know that, but we need to talk a little bit about it. Sacredness of the Quran. What it did actually is that. The Quran need to be written when it was revealed. And there's a story about it. We know how how the Quran was wrote, generally speaking, but also need to be written in such a way to elevate to the level of sacredness of the Quran. In that process, what happened is, because the Quran is in the Arabic language, as we all know, the Arabic language was treated in a certain way by those people who want to write the Quran. Arabic language was not good in writing wise. In other words, the shape of the letters, shape of the words, and they were actually, ugly. Contrary to the level of performance in terms of speech, Arabs before Islam were way ahead in terms of speech and talking and poetry. We know that. So on one hand, they are very advanced in terms of oration, in terms of talking, in terms of speech, but at the same time, in terms of writing, they were nothing there. So what happened, the Quran actually salvaged that, because somebody had to write the Quran, and the Quran needed to be written in a beautiful way. Then the Arabic language was actually, in a way, I don't want to say corrected, but developed. The writing developed, and there's a lot of things there happening. So the sacredness of the Quran salvaged the Arabic language in terms of writing. Then at the same time, the sacredness of the Quran indicated, or in a way require the Quran need to be written in a beautiful way, and that is calligraphy and illumination. Calligraphy is the writing of the text. Illumination is the, if you will, decoration, ornamentation, and so on and so forth. So that's the Quran. So look at the Quran, open one of the Qurans, even here, you would see there's beautiful things happening there. The second part of the idea is that the Quran, because it's sacred, goes the writing of the text in a very beautiful way. Writing the text in a beautiful way made people to take that and apply it in the mosque. And that is the gist of this presentation. So if you think about the upper piece here. By the year
So can we
800,
bring this full,
larger?
Yeah.
I can.
full screen? That's what I want to read it there.
Yeah.
No.
Actually, just put it on display.
Oh, you're talking
Just
about,
hit this.
you're talking about here, this, show, the show.
Yeah,
Oh,
show.
Yeah, your slideshow.
Slideshow.
Did I hear this right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. From the beginning,
Yeah, there we go.
how about that? So you receive better, correct? Um, That better?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit better. Okay, good, excellent. So the idea is basically about 800 common era. That's about what, less than 200 years since the invention and the coming of Islam. We have already some sort of architecture happening all over the Islamic world. So religious and secular architecture materialized in the vast area. Western Asia, obviously, North Africa, southern Spain, and so on and so forth. This is history, we all know that. So the theological, talk about theology, the theology here. Rationalization behind the historical evolution of the mosque architecture is more formidable to consolidate. And this is what is happening. Why the mosque or the sudden gorgeous building? What is happening in it? And so there's not really enough information to understand that. And this is part of what we're talking today here. Now, if you look into these three panels here, first of all, I'm talking now not about calligraphy, I'm not talking about illumination, I'm talking about the masjid in general. So look at the panel number 1 on the top. There isn't anything that has been said in the Quran about how the masjid should be laid out or designed, nothing, right? So that's number 1. The Prophet led the faithful in prayer in architecture in Mosque of Medina. So the Prophet is actually the leader, as I would say, the inspirer, the discovery, the catalyst about discovering how the mosque should be, because he started leading the faithful and obviously follow what he is doing and what he's saying. And then one thing added to the other, and there was an idea about probably this is the way we need to pray, this is the way we need to align, and so on and so forth. And there is, as we know, there is an imam and there's people behind him. All this has spatial implications. Actually, look at you sitting here. The way this is designed, because this is a lecture. See? So the purpose obviously dictate the arrangement, if you will, design in general. The mihrab, just an example, is one feature. So the early experience of Muslims, they start discovering there's something called mihrab, and there's imam, their lead, and. So this is as far as we know about architecture early on. Okay. The caliphs early on, obviously, after the Prophet, that's where, obviously, that's the period where we expect the space called mosque probably start developing. So escalated through succeeding Umayyad ascendancy, obviously, because Umayyads came the next. Then after that, obviously, what happened is sort of a result is the rise of architectural masterpieces in the expanding Islamic world. So we're still talking about mosque in general, not about calligraphy. So what's happening here, these are aspects known in any design of buildings. We all know that, like the functional layout. When you put a building, like when this building, our mosque was built, there's an environment around it. So somebody thought about how we're going to place this, why, which direction, and. Number 2 here, interior space planning, very obvious. Somebody thought this is the best way to plan it, the mosque. there's corridor, there's prayer hall, there's lecture hall, there's downstairs and upstairs. The last one, construction techniques. Obviously, even in this mosque, there's a certain way for that thing we call mosque, built, the material, the people, the scheduling, and so these are typical things. But what happened here is where we see non-serve as the innovations in calligraphic inscriptions and ornamentation. These are two things go together. Never, well, I don't want to say never early on, it was probably calligraphy. Then after a while, when you write Quran in calligraphy, there is always the element of illumination or ornamentation or decoration or whatever you call it. The levels were very high, and these words, not from me, these from actually scholars who look into it, and most of them, a lot of them, I don't want to say most of them, are actually in the West, in England, in the US, and so on and so forth. So what about the source of motivation? So why we have that beauty through calligraphy and illumination? We're repeating ourselves here, but so essentially, I think this is when I start talking today, I talked about these two things. Essentially, the idea of sacredness of the Quran required writing the elevation in beautiful language, and that's calligraphy and illumination. Once the Quran was written beautifully, it's borrowed, the concept, the design concept, beauty concept of it, taken and put in the mosque. This is what that says, right? So my idea, these are the three things, the questions out of this setup. And let me say, this was, the way I put it looks like a bit too academic. I did this paper some time ago, was published somewhere, and I tried to simplify it, I could not. You follow what I'm saying? When you have a lot of ideas, you're gonna see how we're gonna simplify that. But still I simplify it. So simply you're thinking, what made the Quran the absolute source of manifestation of sacredness? To the sacred art of the Quran were developed in response to the established idea of the Quran sacredness. And the last one, how the mosque. Those three things. The sacredness, the beautiful service arts of the mosque, actually service, a beautiful calligraphy and illumination of the Quran, written book. And third, how this go to the mosque, which you see in number 3 here. The first aspect about the sacredness of the Quran, there's a lot of ways to think about the sacredness of the Quran. A lot of them written in the Quran itself. So we pick just a couple or 3 of them. And this is, for example, the source of the Quran. This is ayah in the book, which says the divine nature of the revelation is asserted bluntly as being from God. The exalted in power and full of wisdom. And that's what we see here. So this is one of the ayahs, obviously, with reference to it. The second is the mercy. That's other aspect of which make us think highly of our book, the Quran, as the idea of mercy. And you could probably contemplate this. We all somehow probably, maybe at one time or other, we came across this ayah or similar ayahs like that. Receiving divine mercy is one of the innumerable favors that sacred word engenders. But the divine reminds us that community that obtaining mercy is contingent upon righteous behavior. I think we heard about these before. But the context here is in context of the mercy attribute of the Quran. Obviously, another aspect here is the aspect of the guidance, of the general guidance. It's full of wisdom and guidance for us, for the humanity in general, for Muslims in particular. Uh, Receiving the divine guidance leading to peace, safety, and light is figure of the sacred word afforded only to those who seek God's pleasure. Okay. Other aspects about Quran is the way we read Quran and the way how we're going to listen to it. The Quran really glorified itself, provided the revelation by saying, hey, there's certain ways for us to listen to the Quran. There's certain ways for us to read the Quran. And obviously, I bet you most all of us probably at one point or other went across these points. Like the ayah 204 in Surah 7, it says something about when you hear the Quran, you need to pay attention. We know that. Yeah. Okay. And the next line, when you recite the Quran, probably most of us read the Quran. We are not expert on reading the Quran. I don't think there is necessarily a penalty if your intent is good to read the Quran. But the idea is to encourage us to know how to read, to recite the Quran, essentially. This is in green. The name of the book itself, Quran, we know what Quran means. Quran coming from Quran, from reading, from knowledge, it can be more, really, more meaningful than that. The tilawa and tajweed, we know those two types of reading. These are two classifications, and these are obviously two styles of reading that not all of us really be able to do that, or maybe some of us will do that. Okay, here we go. So, now we're coming back to the idea of the Quran, writing the Quran. But in that sense, we need to understand the context of the Arabic language when it came. So we have very lofty language of the Quran, but we have not very lofty way of writing when it came. So you could see there, the Lucifer traces the Semitic. Now we're talking about the Arabic language because that's the vehicle where the Quran was written, or through which the Quran was written. It is the Semitic languages, associated with Semitic languages in that period of time, in that regional context. Nabateans are probably, maybe some of us heard about them, but Nabateans is a kingdom was established in Jordan, South Jordan, in Petra. Probably you know about Petra. Petra is a phenomenal place, actually. So the Nabateans have connection with that. They are Arab, from Arab people. Eventually, the word North Arabic in literature came to be defined as the Arabic as known in the north part. North means, southern Jordan, Syria, and these places, versus the southern Arabic, which is Yemen, the Yemen area, and so on. And this is the word which I was talking about, coarseness. The writing, the words, look at them, they are not really very beautiful. We'll see some of them coming. Again, I think I'm repeating what I started saying here. Writing was not celebrated. It was dedicated on the side. Some people wrote, some people didn't. but definitely in contrast with the power of speech, phenomenal power of speech. It's very contradictory. It's very contradictory situation. You are very great. Actually, the poet, from my research, the poets, the speakers, the orators were very proud to show themselves the way they do things, their performance, you know. But at the same time, they didn't care much about writing the script, at least in a good way. And obviously, this is Arabia, as we all know, and this is about where Jordan is and Petra. Okay, here we go. These are examples. I know probably it's hard to read everything there, but here it says Arabic Musnad, one type of Arabic at that time called Musnad. Alphabet sketched by Al-Hamadani in book in about 945 Common Era, right? That's about more than 1,000 years ago, right? So in other words, this is a scholar who is Muslim, was looking back into how the Arabs wrote and how they did and so on. So you could see there the letters written, I don't know if you could see there, it's green. Probably the picture does not show green very much. In other words, the first one on the top here to the left, you see the original is in a black line, and the green is actually explanation by the person himself, that this means that, Qaf is this, A is this, and so on and so forth. Look at that. That one, it looks like the first word is Allah or something of this nature. So it's not really very, very well done. So he's saying is that this is in Namara, close to Damascus. This is also in the very old, actually Nabatean. The Nabatean language was influenced by other languages around that. The Syriac language was part of that, and I guess even there was a Greek influence somehow got to there. The Aramaic, we heard about Old Aramaic, definitely in particular. That's, as we know, we heard that Prophet Jesus spoke Aramaic, you know, that's the language then. So this is the Nabatean inscription, but it sort of, as it telling us, the Arabic language was influenced by something of this nature. This slide you're all familiar with. I think some of our speakers here talk about this, how the Quran was really written. So were the revelation written in a book form? They were not at the time of the Prophet. They were different fragments and other ways of writing. Then the two things happen. Huffaz, people who were really able to take the language in their mind by heart. And the other one, obviously, is recording on appropriate services. We are familiar with that. But what happened is, these people who are Huffaz, obviously, grew older, and there was this conquest of Islam all over the world. Some of them died. And they said, well, just a second, we're going to lose the Quran here. These are the people who know the Holy Book. And therefore, that was sort of concern. Also, the Arab word, the Islamic word expanded, opening Iraq, Egypt, going to the east, north, Iran, Pakistan, India, and so on. And then, hey, there's a need for an instrument. We cannot just rely on few people know the Quran. And that's where things came out. And this is the action. I guess we learned somehow, we hear the story about Abu Bakr and about Uthman. Uthman is where the set of this scripture itself different copies were done, and they were sent to provinces. I believe one to Egypt, one to Iraq, one to Syria, and so on and so forth. Okay. These are parts of. So, what the aerial calligraphic variants means now, we're skipping now. We're leaving the idea of struggle in the language, how the language improved, into the fact that, hey, now we are writing the Quran in a beautiful way. So the earlier types are male, slanted, mashq, and nas. These are the very earlier ones. So what happened is the mashq really, the mashq transferred into what we call the kufic, and the nas into the family of cursive. So this is the best way to really to know about the calligraphy. Two families, one and one. This manuscript, you see it is manual, slanted slope. You can see that. This is one obviously one early example. You could see there isn't much tashkil or anything which we know, those signs you put to improve and so on and so forth. So this is very early time. And yes, this is from British Library, manuscript. You could see there's difference between that and that. This is a bit more upright. It looks a little bit more, I would say, more ordered than the other one. Yeah, and this really, even in preparing for this lecture, I also learned a lot about it. I know I did the paper a long time ago, but I learned a lot. So I came across this fellow who wrote very beautiful, really piece about that. So that's from there.
Just one clarification.
Mhm.
Is this the from the Quran which was copied under Usman, Caliph Usman? Because it says in
Correct.
the
Correct. See that? Yeah, very good what you did. If you read on the top, early Mashq, I'm going to read early Mashq Quran, Surah Al-Qasas, right? And it is number, Surah Quran, Qasas is 28 Surah, and 70 to 81 is the ayahs. Yeah, the verses, yes, okay. And Mus'haf is Uthman, Mus'haf is, as we know, the book and so on. And it is in Turkey, in top copy in Turkey, probably some of you. I'm sure, probably Aziz, you know that. I was privileged to be in that place one time, but I didn't see that there. I've seen a lot of nice things there. Yeah, but that's that, correct. So this is the original. Okay. And there's a lot of things to talk about. So at the end, we're throwing things here for you. So we said there's two families, one is Kufic and the other is cursive. And these are just give you some ideas about them. If you look here, maybe first, you could see that this is the Kufic, right? So this is actually the early Kufic on the top. You could see that the Eastern Kufic, which basically Syria and the Levant and so on, is that this sort of the standard, if you will. And these are more beautified kind of styles. That's what they are. That's that. Those ones, obviously, the cursive, Nas, Thuluth, Muhakkak, Nastalik, Rika, and these are just five. You could see probably some of them repeated here, and there is more than probably here too. So this plate mixes between them, but you could see this sort of geometric. Kufic is more ordered and is more used for official because it's not very practical to write. We know it's beautiful, but for everyday work, easier to say, to talk about the right with this one, maybe that or that one, but not necessarily this one or that one. This is the distinction we have to make. Kufic is more into formal writing and special, even in mosque and so on and so forth. It's a very special treatment. This is just last thing I'm saying here. Each word of this needs like a lecture on it, but give you one idea, just a hint about, we're talking here about design and inventiveness, as if I'm saying, hey, this writing with the Quran was not just left for everybody to do anything you want. There was a lot of ways, these are rules, like they use the circle in order to relate how to place the letter and bring it out. It's like a template per se. See, these are the kind of things which really, well, we probably these days we easy know about these because we have technology. This is early on. By the way, this is by the author. This is analysis by the author of what he thought has happened. This is not from necessarily something done 1,000 years ago. Okay, so that. If I can, because we have a bit technical difficulties, I want just to looks like this is not helping us. This discussion about the role of illuminators, the role of calligraphers, something of this nature. But here, I want to just click on one example. Let's say here. This is Sultan papers in Egypt. And obviously he committed, he was the guy behind it, the sources. And the Quran was okay. Sorry, thank you. Yeah. This is in Egypt again, and the Sultan papers is obviously was the person who was behind it and funding it and so on, the batch per se. So let's look into a little bit here about this. This is about here the illumination. Of course, there is, as you see, there's some calligraphy, but the intent of this illumination is that how the Quran usually when it opens, there's a couple of pages usually just beautiful things. They are not meant to read or tell you. And they call them sometimes the carpet, okay, because that's the way, it is. So, and again here, we could go talking about this forever, but we don't have the time for it. I think we have only 10 minutes, right? No, almost. Yes, yeah, okay. So basically, one thing about illumination or ornamentation or decoration is the essence of it is geometry. The idea of geometry, how geometry is used for the simple forms, overlap each other, juxtapose with each other, and treated in different ways to bring out different forms and patterns. Then you throw in color on them, and so on and so on. So the idea is very simple, but eventually, when you do it, really bring out very rich patterns, essentially. Let me see here, next one, see? But here, I guess we have, you could see the calligraphy and you could see the illumination. This is a piece of art. There isn't anything on these pages that is not treated in a way or other. Okay, now you wanna, because this is about, you said, we talked a lot about everything except the service art for the mosque, right? And that was when we failed to be able to connect to the internet. So let me just,
Oh, we did connect,
you did,
remember? We got that video up.
yes, but
Yeah.
it just stopped.
Yeah, stop, stop.
Let me see here. This is.
Neurologists are stunned. They've confirmed that ear ringing is shrinking your brain. Islamic art.
This is about Islamic architecture in general.
Microphone.
This is about Islamic architecture in general, but you could see, and at certain point, if I get a chance, I could comment on the calligraphy and the illumination side of it.
Architecture. In this chapter, we will discuss on the following aspects: architectural factors,
Can you put the mic on your
style.
computer?
Definition: Islamic architecture can be defined as a population in the Middle East and any countries where Islam has been from the 7th century.
Can you hear it?
That's not coming out too good.
Mosque, madrasa, caravanserai, castle or citadel, mausoleum.
Huh.
There are some mosques like in Central Asia and Anatolia that have some Spain or Southeast Asia. Question appear projecting digital close with cardboard and this work.
Yeah.
Architectural feature of the mosque.
Do you hear me?
Was the projections going close with cardboard and glass. Meta is a visual focal point and are used for home and rain. Drone, focal point and covered by the main tree. Canvas are a standard for person architecture or there is a typical diagram of the mosque. The three fundamental forms used in Islamic art: calligraphy, tracing, two. Islamic calligraphy is instrument.
I think Amjad idea is a good idea. Let's can hear it.
Talk in the mic, please.
Right?
There you go.
Yeah, we can hear it. We have a few minutes, so I'll be.
Yeah, questions or comments? My question is, when did the dome and the minaret became part of the mosque architecture?
Very early on, the one of the first, as you know, the dome of in the
Prophet's
pardon me.
The Prophet's Mosque.
Yeah, the Prophet Mosque, correct.
Was there a dome in the mosque which was built in Medina?
First,
Yeah, but this, we have innovations, renovations and innovations going for centuries. But I'm just asking, when did the first dome and the minaret appear?
One of the most known and well-established dome adoption was in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem?
Yes, in the Haram Sharif, Dome of the Rock. Yeah. So that's the one, and actually, it is believed, and some scholars think that, and probably so, that there's a lot of borrowing came from the Romans. And not only that, the people who were hired to do it, they have experience and tradition coming from the Roman times. It's not only just Muslims looked at it and did it, but the people themselves were part of the, it's a profession, So part of it was part of that. So definitely that was one. But at the same time, you don't see something like this happen in the Great Mosque in Damascus. Damascus is more a little bit not as ornate when it comes down to the doming and things of this nature, though it's very ornate and extended, and it has a sign outdoor, area and so on and so forth. But definitely the Mosque of the Rock in Jerusalem is very well established example, and it seems like it is well documented that it is influenced by other culture and other tradition. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did churches or synagogues, did they have domes or
Yeah.
they were? Okay.
Yeah. The churches generally depends on the type of the church. So the Basilica Church, that's the original kind of church established, like everything established is in very simple form, like the mosque of the Prophet was very simple, right? There. I'm talking about the Christian way of doing things. So they start with the Basilica. Basilica is known as very long area of not ornate too much and so on. But with time, especially, in the time of what they call it, the Eastern Roman Empire. Help me out, guys. What is it? Byzantine. And in Turkey in particular, Hagia Sophia, and other thing, it is known, it is all domes, right? I mean, it is the most important thing, and it is the dome on the top of it. Yes, ma'am.
Hagia Sophia was built in 453. That was way before, 300 years after Islam came. But they copied it. I'm sure Hagia Sophia had a lot of influence in Islamic and Ottomans, of course.
Definitely.
Yeah, but Hagia Sophia was built much earlier.
453, that's the history I know. And it went through some repairs and renovations, and that they had some, I think, earthquakes and.
No, that's true, but that Hagia Sophia is a Byzantine
Correct.
Design,
Correct.
and that was the first design where they could have
But-
that big a dome to be, the structure should be
Correct.
Stable. So I think there is a lot of influence of the Christian architecture upon the Islamic architecture.
Orthodox Christian, not the Orthodox and the Eastern Roman
Yes.
influence.
A lot, definitely in Istanbul and other places in Turkey, but in Istanbul in particular, I've seen a few. The mosques there's a lot of domes. Yeah, the idea of domes, because that's part of what is happening. Yes, ma'am.
The dome has been around for a long time. Is the Pantheon in Rome?
No, Rome actually, I'm sorry, Vatican is copied
Pantheon,
Pantheon.
the largest concrete dome.
Correct, you're right.
Many years before.
But it wasn't carried to a Christianity. That was before Christianity.
But I'm just saying that
Correct.
the role
You're
of
right.
the dome
Yeah.
and
Acoustic.
sacred architecture has been around for a
Right.
long
But
time.
in Christianity did not adopt that.
Okay,
It's in their temples.
okay.
That was pre-Christianity.
They're around for a long time.
It has, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did the crescent and star as a symbol of Islam came from?
Crescent and the star. I do not know the answer. I do not know exactly when. Definitely it is a symbol, but I have no really recall. Maybe I've read it, but I cannot say, on that one.
You know-
Magazine has a question.
I'm just guessing, but I've read somewhere
Mm.
that during the Crusades, with all of the bloodshed that happened,
Mm.
there was a lot of blood, and then the crescent was reflected in the blood, and it became the flag of the Turks. So this is just something I read distantly. I can't stand by it, but I just kind of like remember.
And that's interesting.
Yeah.
Means it's relatively recent, because you're talking about the Ottoman Empire, not early
Correct,
on,
correct,
right?
yes, yes.
So if you have to tell us, what are the essential elements of a mosque which makes it sacred? Some mosques may not have calligraphy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think are the essential architectural things in a mosque which makes it a mosque?
There is no prescription by the Prophet,
Right.
and definitely by through the revelation, how the mosque would be. And that, in essence, how we started today. In the sacred, it is a matter of interpretation. Even the idea of mihrab, the idea of the lines, one line after the other behind the imam, we learn it from the Prophet. So it's a matter of interpretation, experience, reflection, and bringing things out. And actually, even this idea of calligraphy, it's idea of sacredness. You can't say more than that. It is sacred. I believe this place or this thing or excuse me, the word is not thing. This book is definitely sacred. I want to express that in my own way. And that's what happened. And these are all forms and norms developed over the years, and each generation learned from the others and developed it into what we have today. So I cannot say, maybe the sacredness for you is different for me, from everybody, but definitely the Islam in general has umbrella of sacredness ideas.
So if we go to the mosque in different parts of the world, the common elements which I would see will be a mihrab, most likely a mihrab, and a designated space for prayer. Whereas the dome and the minaret may be optional some places.
Interesting, because of necessity. Basically, if you don't have the means, you need a space to pray, period. Clean space, right? And that's how even a mosque is started, very simple. Then because you have the means, then you start responding to your imagination and your feeling, and you start working things out. So, and that's that. I gave my students one day, I think about 18 years ago, I gave my students a project, second year, third year, I believe, students. That project was about exactly what you just asked the question. The students have to take a synagogue, and they did, have to take a church, and they did, and have to take an Islamic study, and they did. And the one some people took, I guess, the Islamic centers down around Cincinnati. So those are the three ones, and the idea is the following. First, obviously, is I am making it like, hey, look, yes, we are Americans, but we are also, yes, we are. Maybe you have different faiths, but we are the same. Anyway, that is the intent. But also there is layer of learning, there's objective learning and so on. But at the end, it's two questions. One question is, what the theology of the religion says about the worship place, right? Why? What is it? What is the motivation? Second, take that space, let's say the church or the mosque, and tell me exactly where these things came from, where the Imam came from. Yeah? Why we in rows behind the Imam? Why not we are probably in a circle, for example, right? And there's three groups of students, and each group did really one faith / one worship building, and we did that. So it was really a nice exercise, but we didn't answer the questions. It's not really like a journal article. It's just for us to learn and so on.
Cairo, you said the city of a thousand mirror. What's to do with that?
Cairo is a
That
city.
kind of have 500 mosques, right?
You have the question in just a second.
It's my comment about the Kuba. When I was little, and when we visited all the mosques in Istanbul, and the Kuba was told a representation of the heaven. That's what my grandparents used to tell me. When you are under the Kuba, you are close to heaven.
Kuba means dome.
Kuba,
Dome,
yes,
dome, yeah.
yes, yeah. That's what most of the prayers we always wanted to. When the Jama'at was crowded, we always tried to be under Kuba to pray. So that was how I grew up in Istanbul. You know, the Kuba was presented us when we were little as the representation of heaven.
So last Eid, I think we should have sent people out. Because we were
No, we
so
have
overwhelmed.
Kubas.
Yeah, I heard that.
What time is the,
It's already.
sorry?
Okay.
Well, join me please and thank Salim for giving such a wonderful. The beauty is that it generates more questions. Yeah, I think it's marvelous topic. Perhaps we should revisit it. I will just make one comment about the minaret. I think it was a necessity at one time for the muezzin to climb up and to call for prayers. Because if you were in a higher level, then the neighborhood could hear you. So in India and Pakistan, traditionally had two minarets in the mosque, and the central dome are three domes, one bigger, two small, and the two minarets. Some of the mosques will have four minarets. Now Morocco has gotten away from three minarets and they have only one. In many of the mosques in Morocco, you will have one minaret. And there is a mosque, and I don't remember what city, it's named after a king. And the tradition goes that the muezzin had to get on his donkey, and there was a spiral pathway which led to the top. And then he would go in donkey because it would be very strenuous to go on top and call for prayers. And I often wondered that there's a time between Fajr and Zohar, right? But between Zohar and Asr, poor muezzin will have to come down and go up, or maybe he will stay up. I mean, so these were the innovations at that time that the people did. If you go in the banquet hall, not banquet hall, our
Social.
hall, and if they get, you see the history of the Islamic Center, it starts with illuminated pages of the Quran. We made sure that we have some reflection of the art, and these the whole thing starts from left to right of that. Take a look at it. I think that your lecture, Salim, brings up so many different other topics. Calligraphy is one. Judaism and Islam had something in common, that we don't show visible respect is in our hearts, visible respect to the book in front of us, like Quran. In Judaism, Torah is covered, and it is so sacred that the people who write Torah, they have to have the ablution, and they have to be totally pure, as if they are worshiping, going for prayers, or when they start writing Torah. And in many ways, we have the same tradition in Islam, that the people who did calligraphy, it was a higher art, and it was a sacred art, and it was a sort of worship for them to be able to write that. So here's another topic. So I can give you 6 topics. I thank you very much. It was wonderful. And next week, we'll have a lecture on Bosnia. So please be here. Thank you.